What if I told you that Princess Diana had a secret so shocking, it could have destroyed the monarchy? For 4 years, the world's most famous woman was living a double life. Every Tuesday, she vanished from the palace. No bodyguards, no staff, no witnesses. She was preparing for something so dangerous, so forbidden, that when she finally revealed it, 2,500 people gasped in unison. On December 23, 1985, at the Royal Opera House, Diana did something that made Prince Charles freeze in horror and caused 8 standing ovations. 3 minutes that changed everything. If you're obsessed with Diana's untold secrets like I am, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell, because I reveal the hidden truth behind every headline. You won't believe what really happened behind those palace walls. Let's expose the truth. August 30, 1997, Ritz Hotel, Paris, 6:30 p.m. Princess Diana sat on the edge of the luxurious bed in her suite at the Ritz Hotel, staring at the phone on the marble nightstand. The golden Parisian light streamed through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the opulent room where she and Dodi Al-Fayed had been hiding from the relentless paparazzi who had pursued them throughout their Mediterranean holiday. She was exhausted, not just from the constant chase of photographers, but from the emotional weight of the summer that had changed everything. Just 2 months ago, she had ended her relationship with Hasnat Khan, the Pakistani heart surgeon who many of her closest friends believed was the true love of her life. The breakup had left her devastated, and her whirlwind romance with Dodi, which had dominated headlines for weeks, felt more like a distraction than genuine love. "Perhaps my destiny is to go abroad," she had confided to friends recently, and on this Saturday evening in Paris, that possibility felt more real than ever. Dodi was speaking excitedly about their future together, talks of marriage, of a life away from the suffocating attention of the British press, of starting fresh somewhere far from the constraints of royal protocol. But Diana's mind was elsewhere. Tomorrow, she would return to London to reunite with her sons, William and Harry, who were finishing their summer holiday at Balmoral with their father. She hadn't seen them for nearly a month, and the separation was weighing heavily on her heart. More than anything else in her complicated life, her boys remained her anchor, her reason for everything. As evening approached, Diana felt an overwhelming need to connect with the people who mattered most to her. The day had been surreal: luxury yacht mornings, designer shopping expeditions, and carefully choreographed public appearances that felt more like performance art than real life. But as the sun began to set over Paris, she craved something authentic, something real. She reached for the phone with a sense of urgency she couldn't quite explain. There were conversations she needed to have, words that needed to be spoken, connections that needed to be reaffirmed. Looking back, those who knew Diana well would recognize this impulse as quintessentially her. In moments of uncertainty or transition, she always reached out to anchor herself through human connection. The first call she needed to make was to her sons. William, now 15, and Harry, 12, were probably playing with their cousins at Balmoral, enjoying the freedom of childhood in the Scottish Highlands. She missed them desperately and wanted to hear their voices, to reassure herself that despite all the chaos in her adult life, her relationship with them remained the one constant she could trust. But there were other calls she needed to make as well. Richard Kay, the Daily Mail royal correspondent who had become one of her closest confidants in the media, was someone she trusted implicitly. Over the years, he had proven his loyalty and discretion, and she often turned to him when she needed to process her thoughts about the future. Tonight, she had plans to share with him that would surprise even her most trusted friends. And then there was the call she wasn't sure she would have the courage to make, a call to someone from her past, someone who still held a piece of her heart despite the painful way their relationship had ended. The evening felt pregnant with possibility and finality all at once, as if she somehow sensed that this night would be different from all the others. Outside her window, Paris hummed with its eternal energy. Couples strolling along the Seine, street musicians playing for tourists, the city's famous lights beginning to twinkle as darkness approached. Diana had always loved Paris. It represented freedom and romance in a way that London, with all its royal obligations and media scrutiny, never could. But tonight, something felt different. There was an electricity in the air, a sense that the choices she made in the next few hours would somehow matter more than she could possibly know. As she picked up the phone to make her first call, Diana had no idea that she was about to have the 3 most important conversations of her final day on Earth. The words she would speak in those calls would reveal her deepest hopes, her greatest fears, and her final plans for a future that would never come to be. August 30, 1997, 7:15 p.m., Paris to Balmoral Castle, Scotland. Diana's hands trembled slightly as she dialed the familiar number for Balmoral Castle. It was early evening in Paris, but in Scotland, the late summer afternoon was still bright, and she knew her sons would be in the middle of what was probably their favorite part of the day, unstructured playtime with their cousins away from the watchful eyes of tutors and protection officers. When the call connected and she heard William's voice on the other end, her heart immediately lifted. "Mummy," he said with genuine warmth, though she could hear the background noise of other children playing, and she sensed his divided attention even through the phone line. "Hello, darling," Diana said, settling back against the pillows and closing her eyes to better focus on the sound of her firstborn's voice. "How are you? How is Harry? Are you both having a wonderful time?" William's voice carried the casual enthusiasm of a teenager enjoying his summer holiday. He told her about the day's activities: fishing with Prince Charles, games with his cousins, the usual Balmoral traditions that had defined royal summer holidays for generations. Harry chimed in periodically, his 12-year-old energy bubbling through the phone even from hundreds of miles away. "When are you coming home, Mummy?" Harry asked, and Diana's heart clenched at the longing in his voice despite his attempt to sound nonchalant. "Tomorrow, my darling," she assured him. "I'll be back tomorrow evening, and we'll have the most wonderful time together. I've missed you both terribly." What neither William nor Harry knew was that their mother had spent much of the summer making plans that could fundamentally change their lives. Her conversations with Dodie about possibly living abroad weren't just romantic fantasies. She had been seriously considering whether she could build a new life for herself and her sons away from the relentless pressure of British royal life. "Mummy, are you going to marry Dodie?" William asked with a directness that always surprised adults who underestimated teenage perceptiveness. Diana's response was immediate and emphatic: "Absolutely not. I have just got out of one marriage, and I am not going to get into another one." Her voice carried a conviction that reflected months of careful thought about her future. Despite the media speculation and Dodie's own hopes, Diana had been clear with herself about the nature of their relationship. She wanted to tell her sons about her other plans, about the worldwide hospice network she hoped to establish, about her dreams of using her global platform for causes that truly mattered to her rather than the ceremonial duties that had defined so much of her royal life. It was to be a major announcement, she had confided to friends. It was something she wanted to do, rather than things other people wanted her to do. But as they talked, Diana could sense the boys' impatience to return to their games. This was, after all, a typical phone call between a mother and her children during summer holidays, routine, affectionate, but competing with the immediate pleasures of childhood fun. "We love you, Mummy," William said, and Harry echoed the sentiment, but Diana could hear their eagerness to get back to their cousins and whatever adventure they had planned for the evening. "I love you both more than all the stars in the sky," Diana replied, using the phrase she had whispered to them at bedtime since they were babies. "Sleep well tonight, and I'll see you tomorrow. Be good for Papa." As the call ended, Diana felt the familiar bittersweet mixture of maternal love and sadness that had become her constant companion since her divorce. She adored her sons beyond measure, but she was acutely aware of how much of their lives she was missing, how the custody arrangements and royal protocols kept her from being the kind of hands-on mother she desperately wanted to be. Years later, both William and Harry would be haunted by the brevity of this conversation. "I can't necessarily remember what I said, but all I do remember is regretting for the rest of my life how short the phone call was," Harry would confess. "If I'd known that that was the last time I was going to speak to my mother, the things I would have said to her." William would echo his brother's anguish. "If I'd known what was going to happen, I wouldn't have been so blasé about it." That phone call sticks in my mind quite heavily. But on this August evening, there was no sense of finality, no premonition of tragedy. It was simply a mother checking in with her children, counting the hours until she could hold them again, completely unaware that she would never get that chance. As Diana hung up the phone, she felt a deep sense of love and anticipation for tomorrow's reunion. But she had no idea that the next call she was about to make would reveal plans that would never come to fruition. August 30th, 1997, 8:45 p.m., the confession that changed everything. Diana reached for the phone again, this time dialing a number she knew by heart, that of Richard Kay, the Daily Mail royal correspondent who had become far more than just a journalist to her. Over the years since she had first contacted him in 1992 to thank him for a series of sympathetic articles, Kay had evolved into one of her most trusted confidants, someone who could listen without judgment and offer perspective without agenda. When Kay answered, Diana's voice carried an energy he hadn't heard in months. "Richard, it's Diana. I hope I'm not calling too late, but I have so much to tell you. I feel like everything is about to change." What followed was a conversation that would later be described by police as the last phone call Princess Diana made before her death. For 20 to 30 minutes, she opened her heart to Kay about plans and dreams that revealed a woman on the verge of the most dramatic transformation of her adult life. "Perhaps my destiny is to go abroad," Diana confided, her voice filled with a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. The idea wasn't new, she had been contemplating it for months, but tonight it felt more concrete, more possible than ever before. The relentless media attention, the constant scrutiny of every aspect of her private life, the ongoing tensions with the royal establishment, all of it was pushing her toward a future that would have been unthinkable just a few years earlier. "I'm considering leaving Britain, Richard. Really leaving. Not just for holidays or brief escapes, but actually building a new life somewhere else. Somewhere I can breathe again." Kay listened carefully, understanding the weight of what she was telling him. This wasn't idle speculation or temporary frustration. This was a woman who had spent months seriously evaluating whether she could create a meaningful life for herself outside the country that had made her the most famous woman in the world. But even as Diana spoke about leaving Britain, she was adamant about one location she would never consider. When the conversation turned to Dodi's father's properties and his suggestions about where they might live together, Diana's response was immediate and decisive. "Mohammed has mentioned the Villa Windsor in Paris, but I could never live there, Richard. Never. That place is full of old ghosts. It's more like a museum than a home. It represents everything about the monarchy's past that I want to escape from." The Villa Windsor, where the Duke and Duchess of Windsor had lived in exile after his abdication, held too much historical baggage for a woman trying to write her own story rather than repeat the patterns of the past. What excited Diana most, however, wasn't just the prospect of geographical freedom, but the humanitarian work she was planning. "I want to set up a worldwide hospice network," she told Kay, her voice growing stronger with passion. "Dodi has offered to help finance it, but this isn't about him. This is about something I've been dreaming of for years. It would be a major announcement, Richard. Something I want to do, rather than things other people want me to do." The distinction was crucial to Diana. For 16 years, since her engagement to Charles, her public life had been largely dictated by others: the palace, the government, the charities that sought her patronage. But the hospice network represented something entirely different, a global initiative that would be completely her own, reflecting her genuine passion for caring for people in their most vulnerable moments. "I've learned so much from my work with AIDS patients, from all the hospitals I've visited over the years," she continued. "People facing death need dignity, compassion, and expert care, but they also need to feel seen and loved. I want to create places where that can happen all over the world, not just in Britain, but in countries where hospice care doesn't exist at all." Kay could hear the transformation in her voice as she spoke about the project. This wasn't the sometimes fragile, uncertain woman who had called him during the darkest periods of her marriage. This was a woman who had found her mission, her reason for the next chapter of her life. "I'm desperate to try and make a fresh start and do something different, to explore a different kind of royalty," Diana confessed. "I want to use this platform I've been given, but I want to use it on my own terms. I want to come back and see my boys, and then I want to build something meaningful, something that will outlast all the headlines and the drama." As their conversation drew to a close, Diana seemed more at peace than Kay had heard her in years. There was still uncertainty about the details, where she would base herself, how she would navigate the complex logistics of international humanitarian work, how she would balance her global mission with her role as a mother, but there was also a clarity of purpose that had been missing for so long. "I feel like I'm finally ready to become the person I was meant to be," she told him. "Thank you for listening, Richard. Thank you for understanding." As Diana hung up the phone, Kay felt a mixture of excitement and concern. He was thrilled to hear her sounding so hopeful and determined, but he also understood the magnitude of what she was contemplating. The Princess of Wales leaving Britain permanently would be a seismic shift that would reverberate through the monarchy and British society for generations. He had no way of knowing that he had just received Diana's final testament, her last clear articulation of the dreams and plans that would die with her in just a few hours. August 30th, 1997, 10:30 p.m., the love that haunted her. Diana sat in the gathering darkness of her Ritz Hotel suite, staring at the phone she had just used to speak with Richard Kay. The conversation had energized her, clarifying thoughts and plans that had been swirling in her mind for months. But as the evening wore on, There was one more call she felt compelled to make, perhaps the most difficult and emotionally charged of all. Her fingers hesitated over the keypad as she contemplated dialing a number she knew by heart but hadn't used in weeks. Dr. Hasnat Khan, the Pakistani heart surgeon who had been called the love of her life by many of her closest friends, remained in her thoughts despite their painful breakup just 2 months earlier. Diana's relationship with Hasnat had been unlike any other in her adult life. For nearly 2 years, from 1995 to 1997, she had been completely devoted to the quiet, unassuming doctor who worked 90-hour weeks at London hospitals and wanted nothing to do with the spotlight that followed her everywhere. Her friends had watched in amazement as the world's most famous woman learned to cook for him, disguised herself in wigs and glasses to visit him at work, and even climbed through ground-floor windows to avoid detection when she visited him at Harefield Hospital. Diana was madly in love with Hasnat Khan and wanted to marry him, even if that meant living in Pakistan, her friend Jemima Khan had observed. Diana had been so serious about their future together that she had secretly visited his family in Lahore in 1996, charming his relatives and dreaming of a life that would have shocked the British establishment. But Hasnat couldn't handle the pressure. "My main concern about us getting married was that my life would be hell because of who she was," he had told police years later. "I knew I would not be able to live a normal life, and if we ever had children together, I would not be able to take them anywhere or do normal things with them." The breakup had devastated Diana. According to her friend Rosa Monckton, who had become one of her closest confidants, Diana was still deeply upset and hurt by the end of their relationship. Monckton believed that Diana's highly publicized romance with Dodi Al-Fayed was primarily a distraction from her pain and an attempt to make Hasnat jealous. "It was clear to me she was really missing Hasnat, and I think Dodi was a distraction from the hurt she felt from the breakup," Monckton would later testify at the inquest into Diana's death. Now, sitting alone in Paris on what would be her final night, Diana felt an overwhelming urge to reach out to the man who still held such a significant piece of her heart. She wanted to tell him about her conversation with Richard Kay, about her plans to leave Britain and build a new kind of life. Perhaps, she thought, if he understood that she was serious about escaping the media circus that had made their relationship impossible, he might reconsider their future together. Diana picked up the phone and carefully dialed Hasnat's number. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times, but instead of his familiar voice, she heard only an automated message indicating that the number was no longer in service. Confused and disappointed, she tried again, thinking she might have misdialed. But the result was the same. The number that had connected her to so many intimate late-night conversations, so many whispered plans for their future together, was no longer working. What Diana didn't know was that Hasnat had recently changed his phone number, partly as a way of moving on from their relationship and partly to escape the ongoing media attention that their romance had generated. In the weeks since their breakup, he had been trying to rebuild his life without her, focusing on his medical work and attempting to find some peace away from the chaos that loving Princess Diana had brought into his previously quiet existence. The failed connection felt like a metaphor for everything that had gone wrong between them. Here she was, on the verge of potentially leaving Britain forever, ready to sacrifice everything for love, and she couldn't even reach the man who had inspired that willingness to change her entire life. Diana set the phone down with a mixture of sadness and resignation. Part of her wondered if this was a sign. Perhaps it was time to truly let go of the past and embrace the future she had outlined to Richard Kay. Her plans for a worldwide hospice network, her dreams of a different kind of royal life, her hopes for meaningful work that would outlast all the romantic drama. Maybe these things were meant to replace the personal happiness that seemed to elude her. But the fact remained that on her final night, one of the last thoughts on her mind was of the quiet surgeon who had captured her heart in a way that no amount of luxury or public adoration ever could. In trying to call Hasnat, Diana revealed that despite all the changes in her life, despite her exciting new plans and her apparent contentment with Dodi, she was still a woman searching for the kind of authentic love that had always seemed just out of reach. Unbeknownst to Diana, Hasnat was thinking of her too. Years later, it would be revealed that he had actually tried to call her that same night, not knowing that she had also changed her number. Two people who had loved each other deeply, both reaching out across the void of their separation, both failing to connect in what would be their final opportunity to speak. As Diana finally gave up on reaching Hasnat and prepared for bed, she had no idea that less than 4 hours later, she would be gone forever, taking with her all the dreams, plans, and unresolved feelings that had filled her final conversations. August 31st, 1997, 12:30 a.m., the final hours. As the clock struck midnight, transitioning from August 30th to August 31st, Diana's 3 phone calls had revealed the full complexity of a woman standing at the crossroads of an extraordinary life. The conversation she had just completed painted a picture that would have shocked the world if they had known what she was really planning. To her sons, she had been the loving mother counting down the hours until their reunion, speaking words of comfort and reassurance that would echo in their memories for decades. To Richard Kay, she had been the visionary humanitarian ready to revolutionize royal service and potentially leave Britain forever in pursuit of meaningful work. And in her failed attempt to reach Hasnat Khan, she had revealed herself as a woman still haunted by the deepest love of her life. But perhaps the most shocking aspect of these final conversations was what they revealed about Diana's true state of mind in her last hours. Contrary to media reports that painted her as blissfully happy with Dodi and ready to settle into a new romantic life, her calls suggested a woman who was actually planning to step back from romantic relationships entirely and focus on humanitarian work that would define her legacy. "I have just got out of one marriage, and I am not going to get into another one," she had told William and Harry when they asked about Dodi. This wasn't the response of a woman planning to accept a marriage proposal, which Dodi was reportedly preparing to offer that very night. Her conversation with Richard Kay had been even more revealing. The worldwide hospice network she wanted to establish wasn't just a dream. It was a carefully considered plan that she intended to announce publicly upon her return to London. It was to be a major announcement, Kay would later testify. It was something she wanted to do, rather than things other people wanted her to do. The distinction was crucial. After 16 years in the royal spotlight, Diana had finally found her own mission, her own reason for being that had nothing to do with protocol, ceremony, or public expectations. She wanted to revolutionize end-of-life care on a global scale, bringing the compassion and visibility she had shown in her work with AIDS patients and landmine victims to hospice care worldwide. Her plans to possibly leave Britain were equally serious. "Perhaps my destiny is to go abroad," wasn't romantic speculation. It was the careful consideration of a woman who had concluded that she could better serve the world from outside the constraints of British royal life. She had seen how her every move was scrutinized, how her personal relationships became tabloid fodder, how even her charitable work was filtered through the lens of royal protocol. The failed call to Hasnat Khan revealed perhaps the most poignant aspect of her final night. Despite all her plans for the future, despite her apparent new romance with Dodi, Diana's heart was still partially with the quiet surgeon who had represented the possibility of a normal private life. Her attempt to reach him suggested that even as she planned a dramatic new chapter of global humanitarian work, she was still searching for personal happiness and authentic connection. What makes these calls even more heartbreaking in retrospect is the timing. Less than 4 hours after hanging up with Richard Kay, Diana would be fleeing through the streets of Paris in a desperate attempt to escape paparazzi photographers. The car crash in the Pont de l'Alma tunnel would kill her, Dodi, and their driver Henri Paul, bringing a violent end to all the dreams and plans she had outlined in her final conversations. The worldwide hospice network would never be built, though the need she had identified was real and urgent. Her sons would grow up without their mother's guidance, carrying the weight of that brief final conversation for the rest of their lives. And Hasnat Khan would live with the knowledge that he had tried to call her that same night, 2 lovers missing their final chance to speak by the cruel coincidence of changed phone numbers. But perhaps most tragic of all was the loss of the woman Diana was becoming. Her final calls revealed someone who had moved beyond the pain of her divorce, beyond the constraints of traditional royal service, beyond even the need for romantic validation. She was ready to become a global humanitarian leader on her own terms, using her unique platform to address suffering on a scale that had never been attempted. The 3 calls she made on August 30, 1997, weren't just the last conversations of her life. They were the final glimpse of a woman who was just beginning to discover her true potential. In her own words to Richard Kay that night, she was desperate to try and make a fresh start and do something different, to explore a different kind of royalty. The world would never get to see what that different kind of royalty might have looked like, but her final phone calls remain as a testament to the dreams that died with her in a Paris tunnel. September 6, 1997, Westminster Abbey, the funeral that changed everything. 1 week after Diana's death, as 2.5 billion people around the world watched her funeral at Westminster Abbey, few knew the full significance of the 3 phone calls she had made on her final night. The conversations would only emerge years later through police testimonies, inquests, and the painful revelations of those who had spoken with her in her last hours. William and Harry, then just 15 and 12 years old, walked behind their mother's coffin through the streets of London, carrying with them the weight of that final phone call from Paris. They had been eager to get off the phone, excited to return to their games with their cousins at Balmoral. For the rest of their lives, they would be haunted by the brevity of that conversation and the words they never got to say. "I have to deal with that for the rest of my life," Harry would confess 20 years later. "Not knowing that it was the last time I'd speak to my mum, how differently that conversation would have panned out if I'd had even the slightest inkling her life was going to be taken that night." William would echo his brother's pain. "If I'd known what was going to happen, I wouldn't have been so blasé about it." That phone call sticks in my mind quite heavily. Richard Kay, the journalist who had received Diana's longest and most revealing final call, found himself carrying the weight of her unrealized dreams. Her plans for a worldwide hospice network, her consideration of leaving Britain permanently, her vision of a different kind of royalty, all of it had died with her in the Paris tunnel. It was to be a major announcement, Kay would later testify at the inquest into her death. The hospice network would have been groundbreaking, combining Diana's global profile with her genuine passion for end-of-life care. With Dodi's financial backing, it could have revolutionized compassionate care for dying patients around the world. But perhaps the most heartbreaking aftermath involved Hasnat Khan, the surgeon who never received Diana's final attempted call. Years later, it would be revealed that he had tried to call her that same night, not knowing she had changed her number. Two people who had loved each other deeply, both reaching out across the void of their separation, both failing to connect in what would be their final opportunity to speak. "I think that if Diana were alive today, we would have remained very good friends, whatever she did and whomever she was with," Khan would tell police in his 2004 statement. "It is a huge loss when someone very close to you dies." The failed connection between Diana and Hasnat became a powerful symbol of all the unfinished business, unspoken words, and unlived possibilities that died with her. If they had managed to speak that night, would it have changed her plans? Would she have reconsidered her relationship with Dodi? Would she have decided to return to London immediately instead of staying another night in Paris? These questions would torment those who loved her, but they also revealed something profound about Diana's final hours. Her 3 phone calls showed a woman who was not the desperate, love-struck figure that some media reports suggested, but rather someone who was thoughtfully planning the next phase of her life with remarkable clarity and purpose. The worldwide hospice network she envisioned would have been her greatest achievement, far surpassing even her groundbreaking work on AIDS awareness and landmine campaigns. She understood that dying patients needed more than medical care. They needed dignity, compassion, and the kind of human connection that she had always been able to provide naturally. Her willingness to leave Britain permanently revealed how seriously she took her humanitarian mission. She was prepared to sacrifice the comfort and familiarity of home in order to serve a global cause that she believed required her full attention and freedom from royal constraints. And her attempted call to Hasnat showed that even as she planned this dramatic transformation of her public role, she remained vulnerable to the very human need for love and connection that had always defined her private struggles. The 3 conversations of August 30, 1997, became Diana's inadvertent last testament, a final revelation of her priorities, dreams, and the path she had chosen for her future. They showed a woman who had moved beyond personal pain to embrace a larger purpose, while still carrying the hopes and wounds that made her so relatable to people around the world. In the years since her death, both of her sons have worked to fulfill aspects of the vision she outlined in her final calls. William and Harry have both made mental health, homelessness, and humanitarian causes central to their royal work, carrying forward their mother's belief that royalty should be about service rather than ceremony. The hospice network Diana dreamed of was never built as she envisioned it, but her influence on end-of-life care has been lasting. Her compassionate approach to death and dying, demonstrated in her hospital visits and her willingness to touch and comfort dying patients, helped change public attitudes about terminal illness and grief. Diana's final phone calls remind us that even in our last hours, we reveal who we truly are through the people we choose to contact and the words we choose to speak. She called her children to express her love, her confidant to share her dreams, and tried to reach the man who had shown her what authentic love could feel like. In doing so, she left behind a portrait of a woman who was far more complex, thoughtful, and purposeful than the tragic princess of popular mythology. Her legacy lives on not just in the charitable work that continues in her name, but in the example she set of using fame and privilege in service of those who need it most. If Diana's courage to plan for meaningful change even in her final hours inspired you, like this video and subscribe for more untold stories from behind the palace walls. Hit that notification bell so you never miss the moments when extraordinary people choose to use their final opportunities to show love, share dreams, and reach for connection. Diana's last conversations remind us that our final words matter. They reveal who we really are and what we truly value. What would your 3 final calls reveal about your priorities? Let us know in the comments below.